What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. Football is back, and I can't wait to get all of the news and give my thoughts and opinions about everything coming out. But the focus of this video is around our joint practices this offseason, and we have a ton of them scheduled. We're up there with we're tied with the group for second most with 3 joint practices. The Rams are leading the NFL with 4, but we have the Commanders that will be visiting us on August 8th, the Panthers who will be hosting a joint practice on August 15th, and then the Giants that will be visiting us on the 21st of August. So with that said, there's always a different air of expectations, some wrinkles, some experimentation that the New York Jets will be upping, if you will, when it comes to facing different opponents, right? This has been a staple of the Robert Saleh tenure, is that they want to face these other teams. They consider it a very good tune-up and essentially a preseason game within a preseason game, especially when you don't necessarily plan on deploying a lot of your starters on one or both sides of the ball, and you can really dive into a lot of the lesser known training camp battles for the bottom of the roster, right? And we've seen a number of guys be able to take advantage of this before. So a couple storylines came to the forefront of my mind when it came to these joint practices, and then we'll dive into some of the lesser known or low-key players to keep an eye out for during joint practices here. But question number one being, will we start seeing the offensive line practice together in full during joint practices, right? There's a number, the offensive line might have the most amount of people recovering from an injury that we expect to be starting, right? You have Tyron Smith with his modified schedule he'll be on, right? So that the reason I was extremely hyped about Olu Fashanu coming over was that there was going to be a ton of practice reps for a guy we don't necessarily need or expect to be a starter due to Tyron Smith being on this modified schedule. But you also take a look at John Simpson being one of the only healthy options, Joe Tippmann being one of the other only healthy options, AVT still recovering, Morgan Moses still recovering. At what point do we see these guys all together, right? You'd hate for it to be towards the final or back end of the last preseason game, and then they're rusty, they haven't built that chemistry and really gelled together heading into a crucial week 1 matchup against the 49ers, who tend to always be prepped, able to execute their game plans, right? And things can look silly for us very early and often, and you'd hate to see Aaron Rodgers in that predicament. So I would love to see, even if it's in limited reps, the starting 5 all together against these various other opponents, right? So they can start to get a feel for what it is they want to do from a checks perspective, and just getting used to things like the combo blocks and stuff that we'll deploy. Secondly, can Rodgers dominate in a competitive setting early, right? The entire allure of Aaron Rodgers is the chess game within a chess game for him, right? Coming off his most recent interview, he had some eye-opening comments. One of them that stood out to me was make football hard again, right? From the physical aspect, of course, all the way up to the mental side that I've talked about on a number of occasions. But he's the mastermind that we want the same comments that we're hearing from a CJ Mosley, that he's slicing and dicing, and not just from the fancy perspective of being able to do no-look passes and things, but really constantly manipulating the opponent on the defensive side and putting the best guys to get the job done for what he's looking to do in the best positions to succeed. And by virtue of that, we also should see who can stand out with Aaron Rodgers' demands against some of these opponents. And then finally, or I guess this is more of kind of like a two-parter storyline, right? Is the defense going to pick up where they left off in 2023? That meaning being elite, often early, consistently, and who leads the way defensively, right? So at the forefront of my mind is Jermaine Johnson. He's not backing down from the Super Bowl expectations, putting out there a Super Bowl or bust, but he's also made his own headlining comments about wanting to be an apex predator in the league. Can he take that next step and ascend to the likes of, the TJ Watts and the Myles Garretts of the world, which is lofty expectations, but that's what he's putting on himself. So can he be a driving force during the joint practices for us during training camp? I want to walk away with, hearing some kind of commentary from the Commanders, from the Panthers, from the Giants that guy is going to be a problem, right? And I think that'll do a lot to manifest some of those expectations from early and often. And then, of course, just a number of other people. Sauce Gardner stepping up, as he mentioned, in a vocal leadership role. But who else is going to be there, right? On the defensive side, it feels like there's a number of guys, a Quinnen Williams, a Jermaine Johnson, if you will. You could put a Hassan Reddick out there, even though he's not homegrown for us. A Sauce Gardner. You'd like to see somebody like a Quincy or a CJ in that role as well. But there's a couple of guys that kind of have had that face of the franchise or face of the defense moniker. So I'm excited to kind of see what that ultimately looks like. And then from the perspective of low-key guys, these are some of my favorites, right? These are just some of the names that will be intriguing to me, but especially on the defensive side, we'll get into it. Andrew Peasley, quarterback, talked about this. He has some low-key opportunities here to potentially walk into the season as QB3, depending on how we handle the Jordan Travis situation. Xavier Valade and Izzy Abanikanda. Now, Xavier Valade particularly, again, a running back coming out of Arizona State. I really liked him last year and thought that he could have filled a crucial role for us, especially with us seeing how Dalvin Cook did not respond well to being in the Jets environment. And again, this year, Izzy is once again in the doghouse. Maybe they decide to practice squad him. I don't foresee us necessarily carrying two running backs, but it could happen. But maybe this opens up the path for Valade to find a way onto the roster as a guy that can be, kind of a Breece Hall light from the perspective that he can bring you the power. He can also bring you some underrated speed. So he should be able to hit the gap scheme elements as well as still being able to hit those outside zone runs. Irvin Charles, Jason Brownlee. This feels like a matchup where even though Jason Brownlee may be the more the better receiving prospect, Irvin Charles has the pedigree on special teams already with Brant Boyer. Robert Saleh's bought in, right? The wolf of special teams, as the nickname goes for him. But he's also had some underrated moments last year, too. He got a shout out just like Jason Brownlee and Xavier Gibson from Aaron Rodgers. He does bring intriguing size. Maybe he finds a way to win out, or maybe even Jason Brownlee finds a way to outperform Alan Lazard and force the Jets to look to trade him maybe for pennies on the dollar or just outright cut him, and they decide to favor the youth here. But Jason Brownlee is another name that once the pads come on, he could start to showcase that catching traffic ability like we've seen with a handful of the highlights last year. Kenny Yeboah, can he continue to fend off Zach Kuntz, and just how much would he be factored into the New York Jets game plans this year, right? We've seen him already as a vertical threat during OTA practices. We've seen the sneaky blocking ability that he brings, and obviously he's also a special teams ace, so he just seems favored to be able to win, but I'd like to see if he can keep up the consistency here. And then from an O-line perspective, Cole Lavao, Max Mitchell, Carter Warren. Cole Lavao and Carter Warren are going to be my two top names here. Lavao being the UFL all-star guard that we brought over. 3-year, $2.8 million contract, although none of it is guaranteed. But you hope that he can develop into something, even if he can't find a role right now. Scrappy guy. Very excited to see what he can bring coming out of the UFL, and then prior to that, Hawaii, to this New York Jets guard competition. And then for Carter Warren, again, I'm leaning on Damian Woody's expertise here on what he's seeing as a guy that has all the tools to develop, and that's when we were talking about him potentially becoming a left tackle, even though he's more so on the right tackle competition side now. He's still a guy that can benefit a ton from Morgan Moses. He's going to be able to sit back and really develop, and also probably eat up snaps in the same way that Olu Fashanu is, in the event that they need to modify Morgan Moses' rehab schedule. So I want to see him stand out and see if he can truly become a key rotation piece for us, or a future starting option, depending on what we can see here in the offseason. And then, of course, defensively, Eric Watts, Tack McKinley, or Takaris McKinley. I just love a good UDFA story, right? And Eric Watts shining out and being able to beat out Olu Fashanu early, things of that nature, always gets me excited. But I love a good athletic freak too, right? I'm a guy that, if I could, and hopefully at some point we can get the channel up to this point, I would love to go out there and do combine drills or do some, kind of athletic testing and, field work and stuff with these guys, and just kind of see what a life in a day in the life of, one of these NFL guys is like. But Eric Watts really feels like the name right now, just based off what we've heard and seen, that can make this 53-man roster and make a decent enough contribution in his rotational role. And then with Tack McKinley, he's the veteran that's essentially stopping a guy like Braden McGregor, for example, or potentially a guy like Leonard Taylor at the DT spot, just due to the numbers game. But as a former first-round pick, and then having some connections to the coaching staff, you have to imagine that if there's still any solid juice left in the tank, that we're going to be able to squeeze it out. And then linebacker-wise, Chaz Surratt, he's been spoken highly of by this coaching staff. We've seen glimpses, if you squint your eyes enough, but nothing that makes you say you agree with the level of bravado we've heard Robert Saleh talk about with a guy like Chaz Surratt. I'm never going to go against this coaching staff, especially when it comes to the linebackers and defensive line, though, because they obviously know what they're looking for, what traits and skill sets to be able to teach these guys, especially from a tape perspective. So if he can stay healthy, he may be a sneaky option that makes the coaching staff reconsider a guy, from a ceiling perspective, like Jamin Sherwood, for example. And then two names here. I'm going to go with the first one because the second one is going to be one that'll probably throw a lot of people off they haven't been too familiar with, especially if you haven't watched my undrafted free agent scouting breakdown series. But Jared Bernard Converse, he's a guy that, much like Isaiah Oliver, may fit a dual role. He'll play cornerback when the defense necessitates it, and then he'll primarily be looked at as a safety, probably the third one in like a dime or nickel package, but essentially playing like a college star role, right? Hybrid linebacker is essentially what we're looking at with him, but we'll be able to really utilize him as a what do I want to call it? Like a backup chess piece, right? So you get your pawn back to the other side of the board, you go back and you get yourself a queen or a rook or whatever it is that you lost. We're hoping that he can be that piece for us. And then finally, a sneaky name for me that I really, really like, and this is just from the standpoint of what he's really done in college. Shamar Bartholomew, one of the cornerbacks. He, as I label, was essentially a turnover king, right? He gets his hands on the ball quite a bit, and while I think Quantez Stiggers is definitely going to fill that role, I'm never a guy that's going to turn down somebody that has that ball hawking trait type ability, and we've seen the coaching staff be able to do some wonders with other players in this system. So don't know if he makes the 53-man roster, right? But I have a feeling that he'll find a way to make some splash plays, not just during the joint practice, but also during some of these preseason games. And it might be a name that people surprise if he does happen to find his way onto the roster. But with that said, let me know what you guys think, if you have any low-key players that we should be paying attention to in some of the storylines that you have, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.